now I'm going to have to turn away because I know that background is just beautiful. And now
yes, I never changed the background. So really, yeah. So this, just for those that are joining us for the first time, my name is Mai Taralba, and I lead the Santa Barbara Agile group. But really now I just give it the nickname SB Agile because, ever since, COVID times, we've stayed virtual, and this has really allowed us to really just have this be where across the world, we're here just, the mission of the Agile community. This meetup group was actually started right off the coast there in 2014. So that's how long this meetup group has been going, for 12 years. And this has really allowed, myself and others really to just inspire, get a new ideas that we can apply every day. I really want to offer fun virtual opportunities. So as you started, for me, like, we're really all friends that we can really learn and grow with each other. And then I'm excited about for the topic, especially in the AI world. I have a LinkedIn group. It's predominantly, sharing posts, but I would love, more conversations. I will drop the link in the chat later in the session. Feel free to join and engage in conversation when we're not having a meetup. We are also affiliated with the Scrum Alliance and Agile Alliance. So if you are a member of either groups and you want to keep up with your Scrum and Agile certifications, this meetup, by attending today, you get to earn 1 continuing education unit. All you have to do is just go onto your profile on your membership and then self-report, and that'll give you 1 continuing education unit. So for today, we're roughly about 50 minutes of presentation with John and Nick. I'm super excited about their talk and feedback and closing, but obviously we want to make this an engaging session throughout. So, feel free to come off mute, ask questions. Our next meetup will be on June 23rd. We will have the VP of Marketing, Angelique. She is part of the California Central Valley chapter. And she is going to be talking about Agile, definition of done, and AI, especially with nowadays. I would say, we get things started, but we always don't get to done. And so she's going to have an engaging conversation about that. Also, I always want to keep these meetups free. So if your company is ever interested in sponsoring, cover the meetup fees that meetup charges for organizers, please let me know. I'm happy to splash your company's logo onto the meetup group and shamelessly plug it on LinkedIn. And so now, without further ado, I'm super excited to have Nick, who is the co-founder of N-Dash, and John, head of consulting operations, present to the group. And I will stop sharing and give you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here. I will say right before, and I'd love to, we'll go ahead and get us started right here. But Angelique, so I didn't know this in advance. So Angelique is a dear friend of ours. She just spoke at our Professional Development Day. I'm head of the PMI, VP of PMI Northern Nevada chapter for professional development. And Angelique spoke at our event. She was one of the speakers at the event in April. She's amazing. So she's wonderful. You will love her talk. I'm a big fan. And just it's super duper cool. And let's see, do we have somebody else who just, looks like we may have another guest come in. Steve, we'll go ahead and get us started. So, all right. Well, thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can. I used to, I think this is probably some punishment for me joking earlier on in life about people who just generate so many PowerPoints, but I promise you this won't just be PowerPoint. We're going to do some cool stuff today. And we have a mascot. So like, what could be better? Today, Nick and I will be talking with you. And as Maya mentioned, we really like these to be interactive. So please come off mute. We've got a couple of polls in the middle of the conversation, but we really like these to be conversations. So please, any questions, thoughts along the way, we would welcome those. We do have some time likely at the end if I stop talking about this and get onto that. But we really like it to be a conversation, so jump in whenever. But today we're going to be talking about really from an agile lens, getting back to, I think, the concepts of true agility across the entirety of the product team that you're working on, et cetera, and really how, when using tools thoughtfully, how the team cohesion can be better and the product can be better. The agile principles, that was the thing that really was compelling for me. I'm really happy to have Nick here, and we'll talk through that. Wearing some hats for agile coaches, ADLs, Scrum Masters, et cetera, agile project managers, and software craft practitioners. So from there, Nick, if I could ask you, as co-founder of N-Dash, I was inspired to join for some of these reasons and the people behind them. So would you talk about who we are? And
yeah, so an N-Dash is a character that is longer than a hyphen, but shorter than the M-Dash, which we are all uncomfortably familiar with now with ChatGPT and its ilk, throwing M-dashes in everywhere. But an N-Dash is the dash you put between here to there, A to B, before to after, or LA to New York. It represents the connection or the transition between one state and another. And that's our goal. It is to bridge that gap with our clients. It's to also, so we want to get you from where you are to where you want to be, but we don't want to be there forever. We want to show you that show our clients that they can actually manifest those transformations themselves. So we want to get from A to B, from before to after, but we want to show that people can do that themselves to continue to be their own N-dashes as they look to reinvent and revolutionize their companies. And we really focus on the human value. So our core belief is around the best way to have the most optimal system is not to get to 100% efficiency. It is to optimize for what your human workers are getting out of their work. If people derive a lot of intrinsic value from the work they're doing, then you likely have a sustainably optimal system, as opposed to something that's just going to burn out. You don't want your engine running at 100% all the time. So changing that lens to focus on human-centered work is what really is that foundation of sustainable performance. And that's what we do at N-Dash.
So, and
particularly with product technology and ways of working, as the slide says. So.
But and thanks. And philosophically, what we'll be talking about, and specifically for Agile Santa Barbara and agility in general, that it's about empowering teams to be able to live by Agile principles, and that's a lot of what we'll be talking about today. So we'll go through these pretty quickly. I always say it's a little bit interesting to be looking at pictures of ourselves when you can look at ourselves on the video, but for this deck. So Nick, if you did the quick introduction about, you covered some of that on N-Dash. About you?
I think I'm wearing the same shirt as in that picture, so it wasn't taken today, I promise. So my brother and I started N-Dash almost 10 years ago now. Started out primarily focused on applications and web builds, but have grown beyond that into ways of working or agile transformations, product delivery, product design. I've served in a lot of different roles, either by my desire or more often than not by necessity if on a team. So I am not, the best project manager or product owner or agile delivery lead, but I have served across those roles you see there, which gives me at the very least a lot of empathy for the full stack of people on the team. And that is in this conversation and a lot of the work I do, I bring that software craft lens because I am an engineer by trade. But I really enjoy marrying together that software craft with the full stack and working as well as we can with our Agilists and our product-minded folks.
Thank you. I think this is a different shirt, but I do have a lot of shirts that look very similar, and I brought a tie today because it's a special occasion. But thank you. I think I've spoken here over the last few years. I think it's twice at this point. We talked about AI back when that was kind of new for some folks, and so thank you again for having us back. I have a lot of different titles. Most probably salient for this conversation and the roles, again, we'll be wearing some hats that are real hats for us. They're just not the only hats that fit us. As with Nick is not just a software crafts person. I think I've got one. It's over there though. But a lot of my career has been as an enterprise Agile coach, Agile project leader, and I've built my own PMOs out of necessity in organizations and Agile PMOs and VMOs. So that's the lens that I'll be speaking through and to today. And then this is my favorite. I don't know if this is annoying to Nick or not, but I couldn't help myself. It may not look like it because I have a tie, but I'm the immature one. Nick is the less so. But that's our mascot, NDX. So it's an open source tool. We'll be using it in the demonstrations today because we want to show this is how folks, especially if you're non-software craft folks, if you're not product people, if you're not normally writing code and delivering these solutions, some of this might sound a little bit overwhelming. So what we've done is there's a tool that we built and we've open sourced it, so it's available for free. And there's links to it if that's something that your team doesn't have and they're interested in. But if you already have tools, you can use whatever you'd like. So don't get stuck on the tooling, right? As Agilists, we care about the destination, not necessarily the vehicle. But we'll be showing you real world how you can use AI tools like the ones that we'll go through to increase agility. And that doesn't mean just getting more, story points in a given sprint. It means, how's the team working? How is the team working together? How's the product? Customers like what you're delivering, or you just have greater velocity? Because producing more of the wrong stuff quickly doesn't really make anybody happy. So, but DX is our little mascot, and
just as a quick aside,
Yeah.
so DX is a term that you'll hear in the software world. It stands for developer experience. So this is N- developer experience. It is a tool that we built internally and then we open sourced, and it has 3 primary packages that we'll talk about: Source Vision, Rex, and Hench. And I'll dive into what those are, but just so that we're not lost in acronym land.
But you didn't say Delve, so you're clearly not ChatGPT, although I don't think it has that tell anymore. Diane knows what I'm talking about, so does Mai. If you don't know the joke, it's overused, but it is true. The word Delve was, for 2023, I think, the word of the day. So real quickly, if you could point, I always say when I do a QR code, like, I promise this isn't like a Bitcoin scam or anything. It's just a poll. You can type it in, but I'm going to go ahead and do this. How helpful is AI for your org or your team's agility today? Not what is its impact? Are you using it at all in the work that you and your team do? Are you using it, but it's not making you more agile or really impacting your outcomes really through that agile lens? Are we helping our customer? Are we delivering things of value? Are we working well as a team? Do we care about the things that matter? Those immutable agile principles. Looks like we've got one vote, or everyone is voting the same way. We'll give it just another minute or so. Okay. Anyone else want to jump in? Oop.
I think we usually give it about 30 more seconds. We got 4 responses now. Use it. It provides some benefits. Nobody's in
Elliot really wanted to vote, and he could not get his pause up here on my keyboard, so I apologize for that. So it looks like, yeah, sorry, Nick, and you were just starting to read this. For most folks, it's got some benefits in development and delivery. and for some, we use it and it's not making it, but it's not making us more agile or really impacting our outcomes or collaboration. So things have changed a lot since I started asking questions like this. We used to have some that weren't using it at all. Now you can't really avoid it. And this one, whoa, I did not mean to do that. Apparently I just clicked a little bit too quickly. But the fact that nobody chose that last option perhaps is the most, I'm sorry about that, Shannon. Go ahead and jump in if you'd like, and I'll finish that out. But nobody is saying that it's really impacted the bottom line from an agility perspective. And those are some of the things that I think we're seeing a lot these days. So we want to true back to Agile basics. And this is still really important to me. And when I say immutable principles, at least for me, I feel that to be the case. And I won't go through all of these, but you know, in the age of AI, do the Agile principles still matter, right? I mean, as everyone is appending on and saying, well, product and craft and everything is going to be different. In some ways it is, but I would look at this and say, really, and Nick would welcome your thoughts and jumping in on this as well. But from my perspective, AI can make a lot of things faster, but the things that we need, the things that we've already been sort of touching on, as Agilists, is AI helping us with the things that Agile was supposed to solve? Getting better things in the hands of happier customers by more more engaged, capable individuals and teams who can do that work and do it and enjoy the work that they're doing. Teams still need that, and that's what we really want to talk about today, and how AI can help true back to the principles. Nick, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of commentary right now about how AI in development exposes problems that already existed. So it doesn't just solve all of your issues. If you have any cracks in the foundation, AI just blows those open and makes them a lot more painful. And that is just as relevant with things that come before you get hands on keyboard. So the product and the Agile components are just as ripe for exposure. And that's why, like, truing back to these principles and really shoring up that foundation is how teams, not just developers, but how the full team and the full product life cycle can benefit from AI, not just by plugging it in to a broken system, but also focusing on fixing that system.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there's a lot of wisdom there. And we'll talk through some practical things. We really, for those of you who may, I think there's at least a couple familiar faces from the talk that I had done a couple of years ago or last year. But it's all about pragmatically, like, how can you apply these? And that's what we'll cover in today's session as we go through the remainder of this talk. Is these are things that you can walk away from today's conversation, at least with some things you can talk with your team about tomorrow. What's Pacific time, actually. You can do it today if you want when we're done. It's getting close to 5 o'clock Eastern. But for us, and you know, with what Nick was mentioning, you know, Agile and Lean are still an anchor for our work. And so the things that AI can help us with Agile principles and practices, right? Small batches, right? That's a key principle. We want stuff to be small. So if something's broken, the risk is mitigated to some degree, and we find out about the problem sooner, right? That is a core Agile and Lean principle. AI can definitely help with that. Making work visible so that blockers, dependencies, and uncertainty are easier to address, right? We do that. Most of us have a blocked column on our boards today, if not highly recommended. But we can use technology to help flush these items out so, you know, they can be visible, and that's the first step in resolving them. Reducing that handoff waste. So as a team, and that's a lot of what I think we'll cover today, and with Nick and I and our hats, that's not all that Nick does in terms of software crafts. It's not all that I do in terms of Agile coaching and PM work. But representing those roles on the team, like, for teams to work well together, we all know as Agilists, like, that's why we do refinement together. That's why we do planning together. That's why we do stand-ups, is we want people to be able to speak together as a team. to become more than the sum of its parts. Building quality in, right? That's a key principle as well. And the more that we can have solutions that have that quality in place, so we don't miss our delivery because we found a bug that escaped, in regression testing and it's too late. These are real world things that with the proper focus and attention through AI, and then Kaizen, one of our favorite shared words, at least Nick and mine, but I imagine all of yours as well, continuous improvement, Kaizen, change good. Improve the delivery system, not just the current task. So looking at this on an iterative basis is also really important. And Nick, anything else on this slide before I go to the next?
I think that the continuous improvement it was always important, but man, is it critical now. The landscape changes. It used to be, every year or two, a new major version of something comes out or a new capability is available. And now it's every month, every week, every day. There's new tools, new models, new all sorts of stuff. And the more we get comfortable with that change, the more successful we will be in leveraging those new capabilities.
All right. So, and on that note, shared context. How can AI help us with the idea of shared context? So, Nick, I will get this teed up for us. So, 3 disciplines, 1 delivery system. As Nick had alluded to, and as we've talked about in some of the prior slides, it's not just moving that idea. It's not just about greater velocity, right? It's the quality of what we're doing, not just how quickly we're doing it. So we want those better decisions. And as Nick had said about Kaizen, at every step of delivery, right? We want to look at it holistically. So when I'm wearing my Agile leadership hat, I want to look at things like alignment, flow, transparency, and the inspect and adapt loop, the OODA loop, and the inspect and adapt habits. And then product thinking, and this is an area that I guess we both could put our product hats on. I don't know how many product folks we have here. Nick is an incredible builder of products and solutions, and it's a big part of my history over the last 30 years now too. So product thinking about our customer, those are core Agile principles as well, and lean, and that's really important. And then software craft, and I'll leave the craft and the AI delivery if you would like to talk about those last two.
Yeah. A lot of what we're seeing with AI is pretty focused on software, and so there are things that are helping with the delivery of software in terms of speed, but a lot of times the craft, from testability and maintainability, they're not at the forefront. They're not the highest priority for a lot of folks who are building these tools. And so that is critical, but really these 3 working together to have AI enabled delivery across the board, these need to reinforce each other. A team that the software devs are doing something with AI and nobody else is really aware or brought into the loop or providing feedback, they're not really getting to that AI enabled delivery nearly as quickly or as powerfully as they can. So we really like to think about these things together, and we'll dive into some examples of that. And we've got some other literature that we'll share at the end of this that is not specifically around N-DX, but around this principle here of tying Agile product software in an iterative way.
Yeah, that sounds good. And so if you would like to continue with these 3 stages, 4 stages, sorry.
And so these aren't new. It's not a new construct. This isn't novel. In order to plan, you need to analyze. In order to execute, you need to plan. And critically, you need to learn at the end so that you do have that continuous improvement. It's the same with AI-enabled delivery, but each of these steps can be approached slightly differently. For us, the big driver for building N-DX and not just vibe coding hundreds of thousands of lines of code without intent was really that learn stage. So we started to get better at the analyze portion, and I'm going to demo source vision, which really helps with that in a minute. We started to get better at the planning and the executing immediately felt way easier when you introduce AI into your development. But what we learned was that if you don't have a cohesive system for these things, and it could be a lightweight system, or it could be something like N-DX, which is a tool specifically for it. But without that, without some consistency, we learned that there's a lot of wasted time and a lot of rework and a lot of thrown away work. So what I will show on, I think we have the next slide, then I'll start screen sharing, is how we use and why and how we built Source Vision, which is a package of N-DX to provide the shared technical context for that analyze phase and the planning phase, where when you're doing analysis, you need to know what the technical capabilities are of your existing project before you can really plan. You've got a new feature you want to start planning. Well, you need to figure out what is your existing code base or what does your existing feature set look like. That is, that's a difficult task. And we generally rely on institutional knowledge of a certain distinguished engineer or tech lead or subject matter expert who knows the system in and out, but it's mostly in their head. And it's something that I'm pretty good at on clients and on projects. I'm good at looking at a code base and spending the amount of time I need to map out and get that mental model in my mind. But even if I'm good at it, it still takes quite a bit of time. And it is difficult to staff enough people who can do that mapping and understanding of the code. And then also you have people who go out on vacation or maternity or paternity leave, and things just freeze because that shared context doesn't exist because it was never really shared. It was just within someone's mind. So Source Vision, and I will share my screen now. Source Vision is the package within N-DX that is aimed at this specifically. So the traditional way to figure out what's in your code base is you open up a code base and you've got a ton of files and you have to know what I need to open and what files do I need to look at, and you click and click and click. And I think it's kind of fun, but most people don't. So
you get a lot of uncomfortable smiles from this group right now, by the way. But
okay. I'm out.
Trust me, everybody. Trust me. This is.
I'm out of the IDE. Yep. So Source Vision is a simple way that so N-DX is something that any developer can pull from GitHub or pull from NPM and install, and it runs all locally. So this is not an error. You know, this isn't supposed to be in production. This is supposed to be local. So this is for a developer to be using in their code base, and within a matter of seconds or minutes, depending on your speed and the model that you choose, you very quickly get an analysis of, this is a code base, an internal project we have that will be public soon that has 236 files, 44,000 lines of code. I can tell right away that it's a TypeScript application. I can see some general breakdown of what's going on. And then I can really start to dive in and say, okay, well, what actually comprises this code base? What is here and how do these files work together? So Source Vision will give you that holistic analysis of what makes up the code base, but then it also lets you dive a little bit deeper and double click in to these different zones and find out. And this is more for your developers on your team who need to quickly understand what code base they're being asked to implement a feature on. Instead of diving through all the code and looking through that wonderful screen that everyone loves to look at, this is a local free tool that gives you a web UI to click in and start to say, okay, well, the Realm IO, what is that importing and what's importing it? and driving into this and finding out, okay, well, this file has a lot of imports. So what's actually going on here? This is how we solve the problem of shared context for technical context for human developers. Source Vision also, as it builds this understanding of what the code is and how the code is grouped, I'm going to go back and it's going to look ugly, but it also produces an AI-friendly version, an LLMs.txt of everything in that web UI. It's all in one file, so it's very easily consumed by any LLM that your developers might be using, which saves you a lot of tokens. It saves you a lot of time, and it gives you consistency and reduces the errant duplicate. One of the main problems right now when you're using AI to develop a code base is that after a few hours, you realize you have the same function in 20 different places around your code, all defined in those ways, instead of one function that gets imported in 20 areas. Having a tool that immediately gives your LLM that holistic project context reduces those items drastically. So this is the Source Vision part. We'll jump into some of the other items. This also will surface architectural problems. So if there's any coupling that shouldn't be there between the zones and all that good stuff.
I was going to ask if you would be so kind. Could you show that just very briefly, just so for folks on the line? I don't think most of the folks who are here will be, the engineers who are working on this, although some of you may well, and so this may hit those notes for you. But what Nick was showing, if it wasn't clear, and I think you alluded to it quite well, but for me, the magical part with my hat's back there, but with my Agile coach, Scrum Master, Agile project manager hat, I also, when I write code, it's like awful. Nobody should see it. Even AI would be embarrassed of me. But what's our job, right? As Scrum Masters, coaches, we're the orchestra conductors. We're not doing the work. So this, especially this visual thing, as opposed to what Nick was showing in the command line or through the textual interface, we can have a conversation. So this is a real code base. I wouldn't understand. I wouldn't even know what files to look at in the whole the file system that Nick was showing in his IDE. But if I'm a Scrum Master or if I'm a coach and we're going into refinement or we're going into planning and somebody's like, yep, I got this little change to make. This is an objective way. You're not going to say, no, that's a lot bigger or it's risky. But if you can start looking at things like dependencies, you don't need to know how to fix a problem. But you at least can ask. I asked the question. Like your example, Nick, you had one where there was like a file that had links or connections to like 100, right? So if I'm going to make a change and it impacts those files, like I don't need to be technical enough to know how to fix that, or even if it's a problem. But it has given me in a split second, especially for us visual thinkers, I don't know how many of y'all are, it tells me I at least know what questions to ask. And being a good coach, being a good Scrum Master, being a good PM, we're not solving everybody's problems, but we're opening up the right conversations in the right forums for the right people to have those conversations. So thanks, Nick, for letting me go a little bit deeper on that. But I think you don't need to understand the code base directly, but being able to have some ways to help your team communicate better, that's what this allows you to do. You don't have to read the output from LLM.md. I think it's a markdown file, right? But having that space and facilitating it, you're going to get the right people in the room. Maybe it's your architect and a new developer talking. This allows you to know that you can do your work of bringing people together and opening up the conversation. So hope that that's helpful. But that's, if us as Agilists, like we have a very important role to play here. It helps facilitate that conversation. So we talked about a couple of different components of the application. So using AI to plan better. And I think all of us have probably seen this, felt this, lived this. Planning is going to improve, right? If we're facilitating Even if you're doing at the team level and you're doing biweekly sprints, or certainly if you're doing PI planning or broader portfolio level stuff, especially even more so. But a story can look ready from a product perspective, but we may not know that it's ready from an implementation perspective or not. That was some of what I alluded to on that last slide. We won't know, especially those of us who don't spend a lot of time in that code base. That technical context that can be provided is going to help when we need to split a story, right? Maybe it doesn't look risky based on its definition and the acceptance criteria, but once we look at the code base and see the coupling and the dependency, right, we can say, okay, we're not going to split the story, but how might we work with our team members to split the story into the invest criteria and having things that are atomically valuable to our customers? It helps us facilitate the conversation. It doesn't have the conversation for us, but it facilitates it. And also those dependencies, right? How many times have we run into something that would have been very quick to do, but at stand up, or generally what the day before the sprint is over at about noon on that Friday, if you start on Mondays the week before, we've got a dependency that never got solved. And so it's become a blocker, and now we can't really fix it, and we're going to be late. And then having acceptance criteria grounded in observable behavior. So these are some things too that we've just seen and that the product helps support. We want to have better planning, us as coaches, scrum masters, etc. When we understand that technical context objectively, it's going to be better the earlier that we can understand it. So we've got Rex, and I thought this was named after a dinosaur, and then Nick is going to educate all of you as he educated me. I was bummed out for a minute, but I like it.
Yeah, so Rex is for helping you structure your product requirements, your product recs. So PRDs are making their way around again now that AI is very helpful when you guide it a little bit. But as you start to use these tools and you start to feed a PRD.markdown into an AI, it's great until 3 hours later and you want to make a change, or it's great. The number of code bases that have been created and then deleted has never been higher, because people will spend a full day and then the easiest thing for them to do is just delete the whole code base and try again with a different PRD to start with. That was a learning we had, and surely there's a better way to do this. So I'm gonna demo Rex, but I also want to. This is a concept in its abstract that can be solved without N-DX or without any specific tool. Part of the issue that we have in the product world is some consistency with what a product requirement is or isn't. How big is it? One of the first your Agile trainings that a team might have during a transformation is story splitting. That concept, regardless of if you're using N-DX or anything, I mean, the number of tools now that can help with that concept. You can have a robo agent, you can have a copilot agent, you can have a ChatGPT or Claude project, whatever. That is something that anybody now can start doing to get that part. It's not that humans don't want to think through that. It's not that we can't think through it, but it's an area where we can take something that might have been in a definition of ready. So a definition of ready would have a bullet point that says, if this takes more than X amount of time, split the story. Take your definition of ready and turn that into your input into your LLM, so that you don't have to rehash it every time, and there's more consistency if your product owner changes or if whatever happens in that regard. So we have that baked in, that concept baked into Rex, but it is something that we love showing N-DX, but we also love talking about things that anybody can do with their tools that they have. So that's a big one that we recommend. I've got two different projects up here. Inclined I showed, and Go to Bed. This is something that we built last week to help remind me to go to bed at night because I stay up too late building tools. So these items were they started off with a PRD file. I start off with a PRD markdown file, and then Rex will automatically break that down into epics and features and tasks, where the tasks will have their description as they need, and have dependencies lined up between different items. And this is meant to, this is adaptive and evolutionary with new items. So with inclined, I can open up, the navigation and launch polish, or the authentication and identity, and start to open these items up and look through them. But the beauty of using N-DX and having this PRD tree is that if I, which I have many times with inclined, especially because this is, go to bed was a pretty much a 1 or 2 day build. This is a several week build, where if I say, we need to integrate with N-OAuth, we want to have a different way to sign in, I will just tell N-DX, I'll give it natural language. I'll say, let me integrate with N-OAuth. And it will break that down and automatically position it underneath the existing epic or features if those exist, and automatically break it into task sizes that are workable, or subtasks if we need, so that there's consistency in what N-DX is storing as its PRD, and it is embedded into what already exists. At this point, when I build something with N-DX and I open up a brand new session, there's no context already in my LLM, I can very simply feed it my Rex PRD, and now my LLM knows exactly what this application does, all of its features, all of the nuance. And when I ask it to capture some new requirements, it knows where to put it in, and will automatically, reset so that my epic is not completed anymore because we added a new item beneath it. That solves one of those biggest problems that we solved in the planning phase. So the analyze, plan, execute, learn. What we learned was that the planning was seriously burdened by what we were seeing online as recommendations, and what we were experimenting with, where there was no additive nature, and there was so much rework that would have to happen, and so much token burn, to be frank, for a new code, a new LLM session to understand, okay, I got a new feature. How am I going to do that? Am I going to scan the entire code base and scan every line of code just to figure out what the best way to do that is? Yeah, that's what it does, unless you tell it to do something else. And so Rex, that portion of it, really helps to solve for consistency in integrating new features, because it's not hard to get an AI to build you something net new. It is very difficult to have it seamlessly integrate with an existing code base and start adding new features without breaking a bunch of other stuff, or without reinventing the wheel, or bringing in new frameworks, or what have you. And then on top of all that, when you're working with these AIs and you feed it a PRD markdown file that's 20,000 lines long, nobody looks at it, you don't ever review it, and you don't even know what's changing. So this gives you a visual, and this is a local tool but it also has a simple export that allows anybody to host this visual alongside your code base, so that anybody can go in and explore the product requirements. Jira is fantastic. Asana, Monday, Aha, whatever the tools you might use, those are great. But a lot of teams are finding that it's pretty difficult to get those to work nicely with this new AI delivery model. And this is what we have been using to help solve for that, to give us that agility that we need, and that speed and delivery, but also some stability, so that if we put the code base down for a week and pick it up, or a month and pick it up later, the time to re-onboard, or the time to onboard somebody fresh to it, has dropped to near zero, near the ideal state, from what used to be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to understand what a code base and what a product is doing.
Very good. And thank you. And I'm going to move on just in the interest of time. We got about 12 minutes. So let me get through this. Acceptance criteria is a collaboration tool. This is something that I think, especially those of us as Agilists, we know how powerful good acceptance criteria is. We know how challenging it is when we don't have that. We want, and where tools like what Nick was just talking about, we want to be able to connect that intent to implementation, especially over time. We want acceptance criteria to describe that observable behavior, especially before we start coding. We want that shared understanding, that shared context, not just from a technical perspective, but from a functional perspective. And so the N-DX suite of tools can allow us to have this better acceptance criteria, especially using natural language to create, so that we can get rid of that ambiguity, the rework, and then having to do that late clarification that all of us, I think, are familiar with. And so let's see. These feedback loops across the delivery system, we, again, as those who are helping with ways of working in our team and facilitating that, being the orchestrator and the guide for our Agile teams, we want to be able to use this tool. Again, we talked about Kaizen earlier and the iterative nature of such things. So this gives us, all of us, feedback, especially as coaches, as PMs, as Scrum Masters. We get feedback for our planning about the work being valuable, clear, and appropriately sized. That technical feedback, Nick showed a bunch of that, being able to objectively look at code base quality, looking at the work itself. Is it testable? Execution feedback after that's actually been implemented. Does it match what the intent was? Did we find something new in that process? Feedback quality is really an issue with a lot of AI supported development. Nick just talked about some of the benefits of being able to, vibe-based from scratch is very easy to create applications, but setting even quality aside, how maintainable is it if you have to start from scratch each time in Groundhog Day? And then retro feedback, we really want to incorporate in our ongoing reflection. We'll learn other things along the way about our processes, our tooling, and our practices. N-Dash just did our retro earlier today. It's always a mix of people, process, and tools. And tools like N-DX, again, can help with some of the things that you even just saw in the reviews that Nick was sharing. There's some objective, concrete, qualitative, and quantitative data that will help guide us in our conversations about what might we do differently, not just with the tool, but with our overall processes, practices, and teams to make it better. So we've got a little bit of 9 minutes left, Nick. We've got Hench. You ready?
Yeah, I'll just do a couple minutes on this.
Right.
So Hench is the execution agent, the coding agent. It's your henchman for actually building, taking that structured work and the code-based context. So taking what we got from Source Vision and from Rex and turning it into product, into built solutions. I'll do a real quick demo. And we looked at how we have different tasks in here, and we looked at how we've got some consistent acceptance criteria that is being generated for all these items. The other piece to look at is that when we feed this into Hench, into our coding agent, what we get from it is we have a list of all the things, so all the recent activity, and it's viewed better over here, where I can see exactly what was built at what time. Ignore the fact that these are like at midnight or way too early. I have a really good log and traceability of what happened and when. And I also, this is, some of the features in here are flagged as experimental or beta, but a lot of these are accurately tracking the number of tokens that were required to actually build a single feature or to build an item. That is an area where the more we use this and the more we plug in, because right now this works with Claude, with Codex, and so Claude Code CLI and the Codex CLI. and API keys. But as we continue to stress test those different providers and all that stuff, these types of metrics get even better. But they give us immediate visibility into like, okay, well, the acceptance criteria that we put for that was too granular because it burned more tokens than it should have for how little of a feature it was, or we broke this down into too small of tasks because it led to context swap, and that caused more token burn than we wanted. So having a tool like this, and if it's not N-DX, it can be something, some sort of wrapper, some sort of harness around the way the engineers are using AI that give you an idea of what was the output, not just in terms of the product output, but what got you there in terms of the cost. And that is a critical metric and piece of feedback that you can bring back into all of these things are configurable. So the way it breaks down tasks, that's a preference that it comes pre-baked, but also can be overridden by any user of N-DX so that it breaks stories down differently to match that team's operating model and based on the feedback they're seeing from how long it takes to execute one of these things or how many tokens it burns to execute that.
And we had a few more slides, and I know that it's still early on the West Coast for us, and you likely still have some PowerPoint slides in your future, whatever meetings remain on your calendar. So in the last 5 minutes or so, I'll put a QR code up in the background really quickly, but wanted to just say, I know we've covered a lot. Some of you may not have heard the acronym PRD, Product Requirements Document, by the way, if that's not familiar to everybody, but it's a new standard. But it's timeless. Thank you. Shannon at least knows what I'm talking about. Like everything old is new again and all of that. So that concept is quite good though, but it's a formal construct that I think is really helpful for all folks that are building product. But are there any questions? And while I ask that, I'm going to throw in something here. Actually, I just sent you the wrong link. That's actually for today's session. You're already here, so selling past the close, as we say. But we've got a hackathon going on for in about a week for N-DX. So product is free. We're experimenting and having some fun with setting up an event for a hackathon with some prizes. So if you're interested in that, I'll throw the link in the chat. But in the last 4 minutes or so, any thoughts or questions? Feel free to raise them in your own context, your real world today, or the real world you'd like to see tomorrow. Anything that we can chat about related to that.
Go,
Mark.
I just wanted to comment. I think that what you guys have done here is great. I'm going to check it out. I am a developer. I'm also the organizer, the BA, and all that other stuff. So I can definitely see where this would be helpful in a few ways. I've been wondering how to kind of organize all my code sets, and yeah, I do probably burn through more tokens than I should with having similar functions within an app because I'm really not analyzing the base anyway. I'm just letting it build. But the big part here though is being able to create a tree of how the application works, which I've done before, and I let Claude run on it overnight one time, and it worked. It burns so much tokens. So if I can better plan out the architecture with something like this, then I think maybe it won't burn so much tokens overnight, and get things done. So, yeah.
That's part of it. Another part that we found helpful is to actually introduce more of the manual steps into the workflow. So one of the things that Hench does is with every task, it makes sure that it's doing it with test-driven development, but it also runs all of the tests. It does these things that might take some time, but they don't burn any tokens. Yeah. And that actually helps your token quota last longer because it's not doing as much rework, and a lot of the time that's spending is not any LLM inference. It's waiting for your test suite to pass and all of that. And there's there's, Ralph was the big paradigm in January that now is baked into Claude Code with the / command of goal. Those sorts of things, start using them right away, try them out, and get that. You need to experiment because it's your code base. And SDX might be great for it. It might fall short in some areas. Please let us know. Open up an issue on GitHub. Reach out to us directly if it's not hitting the mark for you on that. And also, I'm excited to connect on LinkedIn to hear what you're finding is helpful that's outside of the M-DX realm.
Yeah, and I can see where if this, I know this is running local, but for we don't have a local machine that just stays on all the time. So it'd be great if it was something I could deploy up on, like our Vercel instance, that could be the repository for all, because we use GitHub, but I like that what this is doing to be sort of the repository for all of the projects running on Vercel. So, so as we're adding features, it just automatically adds to the master index on Vercel that everybody could get to. Locally, somebody would have to ask me, hey, can turn your machine on.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I'm a one-man team on the dev side right now, but that'll gonna change.
Hey, Mark. From the category of one-man shop, I recently got laid off from my regular job, so I'm now back to doing my solo work. What I do on some of those where I've got a little local site like that is I actually put it onto a shared directory that I can hit from any of the machines, and then I just have a batch file that kicks off and fires off the app. So literally I can flip between my laptop or my PC at home or one of the VMs and fire it up. And then I've got the data saved in a SQLite database for that's going to be independent of the network, and for that's known to be on the network, then I dump it back to a real SQL database.
Yeah, that'll work.
And we're doing some of our goal with this was to open source whatever would be the most accessible to the most people as quickly as possible. We have been doing stuff that is pushing the boundaries a bit more and doing things in that are more cloud-based with this, and trying to get that refined, as well as a more of an enterprise version that helps you aggregate across multiple code bases and all of that. So we are thinking along the same lines with that. And what we really wanted here is no barriers. You don't need to download a new thing or sign up for a new account or worry about your IT setup in terms of new cloud providers or whatever. We wanted to have something that people could install like ESLint, like something that you can run like any other dependency. So that's cool. That's where your head is going to. And
to add to it though, Nick, I want the requesters to be doing more of the background stuff, because that lets me focus on development, right? And we already have a project tracking system that has a full API in and out. And I had already forethought that this was going to get integrated someday into a code-based system. So when they here's the vision. They write the spec, or they write the requirements, basically. In the background, the AI is writing the spec and doing the back and forth with them. And then from that, just go ahead and start building the code base out. It's like basically beginner level application development, where it says, okay, I think I have enough, I'm going to start building,
And we actually, we have experimental in NSGX, experimental integrations with Notion and Jira. Those are not ready for prime time yet. Just because, again, that's another area, working with your IT to get an access key and all that stuff. But what you're describing is basically 80/90s software factory, which starts at like $1 million a year. So we're trying to do maybe $0 a year would be better than $1 million.
No, I know.
So
we're the same, small shop.
All right. Well, I know we're a couple of minutes over, but certainly worth it from my